Greetings, greetings, greetings. I'm Reverend Majadi Baruti. I want to welcome you to Udja Temple and thank you for joining us. That was our hymn it's called Mawu Ye Lolo. It's by the Mighty Fisk Jubilee Singers from Fisk University there in Tennessee. Legendary choir, and that song features, I don't know exactly what Mawu Ye Lolo means, but I do know that Mawu is another name for a goddess there in West Africa. Praise goddess. I'm gonna have to look that up. I've tried to look it up, but I can't seem to find the exact translation. But I love that song, and we've used it to open Udja Temple's podcast or what have you before. And that song just does something for me. And then it's the Fisk Jubilee Singers, man. They can really blow, right? Those kids can go in. They go all the way in. It's from an album called Sacred Journey. So if you can get that album, it's pretty awesome. But that song is just like, woo! And it is perfect for the message today. And I thank those of you who are joining us live and those of you who will join us later on. We are really appreciative of your presence. As I said, I am Reverend Majadi Baruti. I'm the priest for Udja Temple. And Udja Temple is established for a very specific purpose. We are a place of honor, praise, and worship of the African sacred feminine and the divine African feminine. We are a house of reverence of the African goddess. We teach a message called Black Goddess Consciousness. It is our spiritual tradition that we are establishing. And I am the priest for Udja Temple. We are a tiny space. We have been primarily on internet since 2009. And you can look some of our history up. And we're trying to get some old archives of our shows so you can listen back to 2009, actually late 2008 on forward. We're on several podcast formats. Let us go into prayer, and then we'll get into our message. Our message is Hush Harbor, Bush Harbor, Brush Harbor, something like that. Let's go into prayer, shall we? Holy Mother, Black Goddess, Black Mother, Holy Black Mother Goddess, she who is eternal, she who is without Alpha, she who has no Omega, she who has no beginning, she who has no end, she who is eternal, she who is 10,000 by 10,000 names, she who made her first mark on this planet via the usage of red ochre, of certain shells, certain designs of the pubic V, the chevron, drawings, hundreds of thousands of years ago, beginning with African women who were both priestesses and shaman, who were the guides using menstrual blood often, as well as red ochre, to draw pictures of ceremony and processes, healing and guiding community. From as far as the southern tip of Africa, we see evidence of this at the Blombos Cave, for instance, evidence of the presence of the goddess, presence of the African woman. Going up East Africa, as we migrated from within side of Africa to the rest of the planet Earth, we left evidence of our belief and our understanding of the great goddess and our central understanding of an ancient matriarchy where woman was centered and everyone ate, and everyone was clothed, and everyone had shelter, and none went alone. And we didn't put people in prisons, and we didn't throw old people away to old folks' homes. We lived in some dynamics of harmony. I'm sure there was some issues hither and yon, but we established civilization based on matriarchy. If it ain't broke, why do we attempt to fix it? It wasn't broken. And that line still continued unbroken through our priestesses and our sisters who were shaman, our sisters who were the Black Sibyls, and they spoke of the goddess, and they spoke prophecy over what would happen on this planet when we would begin the first sin, what we call the first sin at Udja Temple, which is turning away from the mother, and we see what a world we have today, what a mess we are in today, because we have forgotten our mother, or more appropriately, somebody bopped us upside the head and we got a little bit of amnesia. But now we're here with Udja Temple and other processes. There are other folks doing this work or doing a similar work. Ours is unique in itself. As you can probably tell, I'm a guy. I'm the priest for this thing. And we pray for the well-being of this ministry as it grows and expands, and we give honor to our ancestresses. We give honor to our priestesses who have been guiding this work, and the priestesses and the priests who are yet to come. And those of you who will join on with us, we ask for a blessing on you, that you feel safe and good with us, and that you find that Udja Temple is your temple home. It is community, and we are forming a community gathering. The doors are open for you. Ashe, ashe, ashe. Let's go ahead and get into this. This is probably going to be one of my favorite, and hopefully I'll deliver it with some heat and some beauty and some sweetness. This message I'm taking a little bit personally because I am personally in the message itself. And, that's that Leo in me. I love to be seen. We like to be seen. That's kind of one of the points of our existence. Excuse me. Udja Temple is a hush harbor, a bush harbor, a brush harbor, or something like that. And we'll get into what that is. The hush harbor, also known as a brush harbor or a bush harbor, was a concept of a secluded and informal structure. It was often built with tree branches, and these tree branches were set in places away from the masters and the slave masters' plantations, so that the enslaved Africans could meet in worship of God or their understanding of God quietly. And that's some of the information coming from several sources, one of them being Paul Harvey. He wrote a book called Through the Storm, Through the Night, A History of African American Christianity. So we have these brush harbors or bush harbor. Wait a minute. Bush arbor, brush harbor, hush harbor. Try saying those things 3 times fast. Some of that's just going to hush arbor, brush harbor, brush arbor. This all sounds the same, but it's basically the same concept. The bush harbor is a rough, open-sided shelter that is constructed of vertical poles that are driven into the ground with some additional long poles laid across the top for the support of a roof, which was made of brush and cut branches or maybe hay. And it's almost like a band shell kind of thing. Yeah, kind of like a band shell. And it would be done with the specific purpose of having this space to worship. And the worship back then, and because these appeared around the 1700s and the early 1800s, okay? Brush arbors, they were used by some churches to protect their worshipers from the weather during lengthy revival meetings. They would have this stuff, like a tent. It's basically a tent. It was made literally with like brush. Like I would go back here and, get some brush and construct this thing and stick these poles or these sticks into the ground. They would be vertical, and I would construct this thing so we could all sit under, and we would give praise to our understanding of the Creator. So understand that this is around the 1700s and the 1800s. So the enslavement of Africans didn't officially, notice I use the quotation marks because we're not saying that it actually ended in 1863 with the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Well, the Emancipation Proclamation was done in 1863. It was finally signed 2 years later in 1865. They had constructed it. It took them 2 years to figure this out. So we had this thing, right? We couldn't be in the master's church with him. And if we were in the back, where the bathroom was or whatever, he was always in the back. And sometimes when the church became a little bit more advanced, they put us in, what do they call it? The crow's nest. They did the same thing. They put us up and away from the white folks, just up and away So we did our own thing. But we did our own thing with a revolutionary consciousness in mind, right? We didn't just go and do it, and just imitate Christianity. In the 1700s and 1800s, Black folks weren't afraid to call themselves African. We weren't like, oh no, I'm not African, get it away from me. Oh, get it off me, it's gross and stupid and ugly, just like the white people told me. We didn't do that. We didn't find it problematic. Later on, you would still find us, like we would establish the African Methodist Episcopal Church, or the African Baptist, Free Baptist Church, or the Free African this, that, and the other church. We didn't have issues with the word Africa or African like we do now, where we just run in horror from just the thought, don't call me African, I am not Black. Oh, it's so gross and grotesque and hideous and monstrous, just like the white folks told me, and I believe everything that they say because they are the image of God. So these leafy branches would be overlaid the pole structure. It would block the hot summer sun and most rainfall, unless you get that rainfall that comes like this, then it ain't do too good. The pulpit was set up in the center front, just like now, right? The center front. And the crowds would be overwhelmed sometimes in the space under the arbor, and they would build an extension to accommodate. They would have this set up to build an extension on it. This guy that I referenced in the book, with the book, Harvey, he explained that there were actually like 3 ways in which African Americans would worship would take shape during this period of time. So first we had the segregated biracial churches where the white ministers would preach, right? And again, we'd be up in the back somewhere, we're in the back, behind the white folks. Secondly, they had these African American churches like the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which was founded in 1816. So we had our own churches like that too. And thirdly, it was hidden in these hush harbors where the enslaved Africans were free to combine both. And I want you to listen very closely. They would combine both African and Christian worship practices. I'm going to say that again because it just sounds so sweet and juicy. They would combine African constructs of spirituality with Christianity. Now, here's the thing. It was in these hush harbors where we were buried deep within the untended woods, way back off in the woods, on that plantation, that we remembered the forest of our homeland. You can take the African out of Africa. You can take the African out of Africa, but you can take the African out of Africa, but you can't take Africa out of the African. I don't know why I was having difficulty saying that. Some of y'all be trying to not be Black so hard that you end up slipping into Blackness by accident. You say something like your mama said, or your daddy said, or your cousin May said, or Fat and them said, or Jamal said, in a crowd of white people. That Blackness creeps out of your mouth. And I was sitting at a table one time in this place called the Pizitz here in Birmingham, Alabama. It's a little fancy place where they have little food and stuff like that, and people go down for entertainment and all kinds of little stuff. There's a drinking area, you can imbibe in some liquor. And I'm sitting there, and it was this group of white folks, and there was a sister with them. One, she was the Black friend. When white folks say, "I got Black friends," she was that one. Her name is Catherine or something. I don't know. Elizabeth. I don't know what her name was, but they said something in reference to fried chicken or something. And it was just a normal conversation. And the sister looked over at me, because I looked at her because she was cute. So I admired her face. But when I heard the thing about fried chicken, I was curious as to how her response would be. And sure enough, she looked over at me, she said, "Well, I am Black, but I don't eat fried chicken." I was like, I really don't care what you eat, woman. I don't, why you gotta correct? What are you doing? What are you doing? The fried chicken and the white folks around you. Why? I wonder, why are you doing that? But that would have made her feel more ashamed and shocked and horrified at her slip of the tongue, trying not to be Black or whatever. Because she's Black, and Black people eat fried chicken and watermelon, and we dance, and we have big butts and big noses, and, smoke Newports. It's pretty much what we do anyway. But she had to do this whole little scene, and everybody's feeling uncomfortable except for me. I'm like, okay, wow. I said, oh, okay. I just went back to my work. I was like, oh, sister, you don't have to do that, baby. It's okay, boo boo. It's okay. But she felt like she had to unblack herself or not problematize her blackness with all the white people. So this book outlines some of these dynamics. And we were trying to remember the forests in our homeland and the way that our towns were set up. I don't like using terms like village because we use terms like village with black and brown folks, but with white folks, we call them towns and cities. Or better yet, jungles when we refer to Africa, but forests when we refer to what's happening in Europe, like the Black Forest. Yeah, there's a forest in Europe called the Black Forest, and there's the blacks. But we say Black Forest. We don't say the Black Jungle. We say it's a whole thing. It was in this hush harbor that these Africans remembered home. Leo Erskine, he wrote a piece called Plantation Church, How African American Religion Was Born in Caribbean Slavery. It was there that they would escape the confining worship of segregated chapels and were able to practice in the Caribbean. They were able to practice African rituals and to rest in knowing that the spirits of their ancestors followed them even into slavery. And let me draw a direct quote from there. It was primarily through religious rituals and the carving out of Black sacred spaces that enslaved persons were able to affirm self and create a world over against the world preferred or proffered by the master for their families. So the Bush Harbor was that. It was basically this place where we would service worship, but also a place where unrelated Africans who were enslaved would become sustaining family of faith. And in that process, as is usual, when you get a group of Black folks together, you basically produce earth, wind, and fire. That's what tends to happen, earth, wind, and fire. And there's a whole elemental thing, but I'm actually referring to earth, wind, and fire. Maurice White and Vernon and them, Vernon White and Philip Bailey and the rest of the cats. Black genius pours out. This Black genius, in this case, is where you get the Negro spirituals from, like, well, that sounds similar to Mawu Nye Lolo, but you have other stuff like The Last Mile of the Way and Swing Down Sweet Chariot, stuff like that. That some stuff that would eventually go and grow into Negro spirituals will become blues and would become gospel. So these Negro spirituals are there, and these songs created by enslaved Africans were known to contain often double meaning. So they revealed the ideas of the religious salvation, but also freedom from slavery. So the meetings would often include African shouts and rhythms were also included. So you can't really see me and I don't have a space for you to do it, but that kind of thing. Rhythms and stuff like that. And we're singing and playing instruments and drum. The African drum was centered to this thing. When we were caught in these hush harbor meetings, these brush arbor meetings, these meetings off in the cut, the slave owners were confident that they would so angry rather that they would suffer punishment. We would suffer punishment if we were caught in these. The slave owners were confident that the working conditions and the punishments and the treatment, if they didn't do that kind of stuff to us, they were confident that that stuff that they would do, the implementation of whippings and beatings and other forms of brutality against our body, our women's body, our children's body, that they could they didn't have to worry about revolts and riots. So because that singing and stuff was potent, that drum, that djembe, the talking drum, etc., were potent in bringing about our consciousness to a space where we could resist, where we could fight back. So the treatment and the working conditions and the punishment was very crucial in making sure that we did not revolt and riot. Problem is, no matter what they did, we still did it anyway. You ain't, what's it? Can't knock the hustle. You can't keep black folks from our spirituality. You ain't gonna do all that. You think you got it? We still in the back, whoa, 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 whoa. Still, we still, talking about sweet chariot, come and take me home, which is a whole concept of getting out of here. Whoa, whoa. I mean, we still dropping the jewels, right? Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. These kinds of things that would become parts of the civil rights movement. You can't knock the hustle. And it would eventually become blues songs. My great-grandfather, Johnny Shines, the blues singer, had songs that were revolutionary and pushing back against systems of oppression, as well as love songs. Even in the love songs, in the scale of being treated as if you're subhuman and possibly being lynched for doing just pretty much anything, just basically breathing. If a white woman happens to walk by, you could be looking the other way and someone would say you whistled at her. And then they'll hang you, beat you to death, maybe even rape your dead body. I don't think that didn't happen, because it did. Removing body parts and this type of thing. We're not going to get into the horrors of that. But that church, that Bush Harbor, that Bush Arbor was a place of revolutionary consciousness as well. Now, for me personally, this is some of the fun part of the message. The Bush Harbor, and Hush Harbor. What did my cousin Nell call it? I have a cousin. We are doing she's doing some of the genealogy of the family through an online process and making sure that we can connect and stuff like that. Well, my family, the last name Owens, and you're looking at, well, your last name is Baruti. Yeah, because I changed it, and you ain't going to find out what my name is. I'm not going to tell you. But the last name of my family is Owens. My mother's an Owens, and we go back into time. I am descendant of the Owenses. These Owenses were down in Butler County, Alabama, which is below Greenville, below Montgomery, or south of, not below, south of those. And they were in a town primarily called Starlington. And they were in several little towns, and the counties were, Escambia and some other counties were very close to Butler County. And so they were all down in this area. Just kind of leaning back so I can kind of relax into this, and I'll pull this down to make sure that you can see me properly here. Miss anything here. There we go. That's better. So while we were down there, as I said, these churches, these Bush Harbors, started in the 1800s, 1700s and 1800s, and then moved on forward. So let me give this. So my cousin Nell and I, we were talking on the phone, and she said, "Cousin, you ever heard of a Bush Harbor?" I said, "Yeah, loosely. I have a loose understanding of it." And she said, "Well, that's what the church starting like." I said, "The church," and she was talking about Big Pine Level Missionary Baptist Church in Starlington, Alabama, a little town that's no longer a town, actually considered a ghost town, but it's on the west side of I-65, across from I'm doing that drawing a blank thing. It's on the west side of I-65. The name of the town will come to me. Georgiana. I say it all the time. Georgiana is on the east side of I-65, going south towards the coast of Alabama. Starlington's a little town on the west side of I-65. So if you're going down, you're gonna make a right onto Georgia and into Georgiana. I mean into Starlington. It is still on the map, but it's not an incorporated town. So there are people who live there and things of the nature. And there's a church there. That church is called Big Pine Level Missionary Baptist Church, and we have a off in the cut. And when I say off in the cut, I mean there's this little road. I forget the name of the little road, but it's a little road. I think it's called Starlington Road. And to the right, there's two little roads, little tiny, not even a road, almost like a trail, right? It's almost like this little trail. And if you veer up a little bit, and eventually you'll get to a family cemetery, and that's where a lot of my family are buried. But over here, before you make that turn, you would go south, actually, and just turn south, and there's this church, a nice church, and that's Big Pine Level Missionary Baptist Church. My family, the Owenses, were the third, make sure I get this right. I'm going to just read it directly from the information that she sent me. And this is in the church documents. Big Pine Level Missionary Baptist Church, number 1, was organized, and they say number 1 for a reason, was organized in 1869 by Anderson Gandy. I've seen a picture of Anderson Gandy. He was a very odd-looking man, big, burly guy. So it was organized by his family. It was located 10 miles west of Georgiana on a dirt road on the left side of the road, which was called then Dempsville Road. It's now State Highway. That's right, State Highway, Route 16, I think it is. So it's on the left side. So it was established there. The first church service was held under a bush harbor with dirt floors and an oil lantern for lights. The services were held in that spot for many years. I'm going to get into that time period. The second family to join Pine Level was Jonas Gibson and family, and the third to join was Anderson Owens and family. So Anderson Owens is my great-great-grandfather coming through my mother's lineage. Yeah, I think I got that right. My great-grandfather. No, great-great-grandfather. It's a lot of people. I'm still doing the research through the census and stuff like that, and we're on this ancestry.com thing, doing this mapping of the family. So they were the third family to help establish his book. There's this thing, but they still have the dirt floor and the oil lantern and the bush harbor. So they're still outside. So they're outside like this, like we're outside. You know, this is what was going on, right? But imagine us like getting some of these branches and stuff like here, over here, or even right next to me, you know, and there's branches and logs and stuff all over here, all back here, like back there, there's some back there. And we built a little hutch kind of thing, right? To protect ourselves from the rain and the weather and stuff. That's what they did. So they had the dirt floors, they had the oil lantern. Services were held. So keep in mind the year 1869. I think I need to do some mathematics here because my brain does not work with math very well. Oh, here's the calculator right here. So we are in 2022 minus 1869. I know somebody has already done that in their head, and that's good for you. This church, as an organized thing, has been in existence 153 years. Now, mind you, 1869, that's only 4 years up from the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Only 4 years up from the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Only 4 years up. Yeah. Like, we just got out of the enslavement, physical enslavement, and they're establishing this church. But they were out there for years. So then there were several families that joined. So that my family was the third family. And then the McDaniels, Rileys, Thomases, Cooks, Mobleys, Drones, Graces, Cheathams, Nixes, Craigs, Nolans, and Tillman family joined afterwards. In the early 1900s, they were blessed to finally build an indoor structure. Wait, let me get that. Hold on, I lost my track. The early 1900s, they were blessed to finally build an indoor structure. So they was outside. And what is that? What is that? Let's just go 1910. Let's do it like that. Let's say the early 1900s, because that could be a couple of things. Let's say 1910. These cats was outside for 41 years, roughly. 40 years in the wilderness, child. I love saying that to myself. And now I can say it to you. We was 40 years in the wilderness. They built a wooden church, complete with wooden floors and wooden pews. They had a cast iron heater to warm themselves in the winter months. These cats was outside for 40 years. Who talking about some praising and some churching and some dancing and singing, and I don't know what the instruments were. I have to go down and do some research and see. I'm going to go to the church is still standing, and the Owens name is on like a placard, and they got like the records. So I really got to go down there. I haven't done this yet, but I have to go down and have this discussion with the family down there and tell them who I am by this long, way. Anderson Owens to this person and this person and this person and this person, all the way to my mama and then to me. They've been in existence for 150 years, and out of that 153 years, roughly, make sure I get that number right, 1869, 153 years, 41 of those years, they were outside. I smile because I think about how Udja Temple is working. This is not the preachiest preaching I've done, but I'm teaching, right? I'm teaching. I'm getting you some understanding as to who you are and as to who we are. And I didn't get into all of the what happened later on in the narrative that my cousin Nell sends me. Like, this is a long narrative. Some of the stuff I was reading about that got up to the cast iron heater to warming themselves in there with them. Like, the families got together, started putting little pieces on the church, and it just continued to happen. Like, it was like my one of my uncles and his wife, my uncle Spencer Mixon from the Mixon family, they bought like a stove in like the 80s or something, like the 1980s. I'm like, you talking about some consistent loving of God and staying true to what they believed in. But in its earliest history, I don't know what it was like, but I'd like to see if I can get an understanding. But we've had graduates and attorneys and teachers and all kinds of stuff come up out of this space. These are some amazing Africans, amazing Black folks. I'd like to really get an understanding of who my ancestors are in this place. I think some kind of little fly or some kind of bug fell on me from the tree. I'm literally sitting right under a tree. I mean, I'm under a bush arbor. Y'all are with me under the bush arbor. See, because you're inside the computer. But Udja Temple's beginnings, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was on the internet like this. And I was doing this thing called Blog Talk Radio, which we have archives, but we got to do something I got to pay a premium fee. If you want to donate for that, I'd appreciate that. It's like a couple $100 to get I think it's like $100 and something to renew the account that we have there and get those archives. I want to pull those archives off. I never got around to pulling those archives off. They go back to 2009, 2010, right? And there's some shows that, I listen to them like, But, you gain historical understanding and spiritual understanding as you grow. But you will hear the growth of Udja Temple. So if someone wants to donate the $100 and something to go ahead and get that archive, that would be great for us, because that would be great to add on to the historical here. So our beginnings, we were hiding to some extent. We were quiet. I was by myself. I was like this lone voice. And then Priestess Maritze Shot came along. And I had been dealing with this one priestess, but we're not going to get into who she was. But she was bad news. But she ordained me as a water priest. So I'm trained in water spirituality, water dynamics of spirituality. Here comes Priestess Maritze Shot. We become besties and friends, and we began to guide and move the temple. And she was pivotal in pushing some dynamics of the temple forward, some of the spiritual understanding, including the codification of what is Black Goddess consciousness. I'm going to give this another 10 to 15 minutes, and then we're going to close this out because um, got some work to do today. It is that we are similar. I lived in an apartment. I did a podcast, and the podcast, you can probably hear frogs and stuff in the background because I was right next to a creek. It was right behind my apartment, and the apartment was at the back of an apartment complex. It was literally at the back. And according to Marit Sechat, she said, "You actually like lived in like a hobbit hole." That's how she described it. It's like I lived in Hobbiton, you know. It was in the Shire, you know. I'm like way in the back, right? I mean, I was literally I was like the last apartment in the back on the corner where the creek is, on the corner, down. You have to go down into my apartment. I was like in a hobbit hole, and it was a humble beginning. I would go to work and I would come and do the ministry. I would go to work and come. I didn't do anything. I didn't have any girlfriends. I wasn't. I tried to. That just didn't work. The ministry was, I had the ring. I had the ring. I had to get the ring to the mortar. I had the whole, thing. But it wasn't about me. It was about the establishment of this work. My work is to build the temple. The sisters are to go forth from there and maintain the temple. I'm to build it. I'm not to be the head of the thing and all that. This is a temporary position. But we were dealing with all kinds of patriarchy and misogyny. We were bringing Black Goddess consciousness as a revolutionary spiritual consciousness, Black woman centered. And for years, I had studied Africana womanism, Black feminism, Black women's spirituality, some African cultural constructs and spiritual and religious constructs. I'd read the Bible from front to back. I read the Quran the same way, front to back. And everything since I was a little boy or a young man gave me the understanding that everything begins with Black women and everything begins with Africa. Everything begins with Africa and woman. So it must be the African woman that's the center of all of this stuff, including the three major Western religions. And that's a whole other set of classes that I'm not about to do that right now. We're going to get ready to close up and pull this thing together and gel this together so that you understand that we are too a hush harbor, a bush harbor, a brush harbor, or something like that. That is what this ministry is. We have been outside doing the work. We want to return to the outside. We may do it here. We may do it some other space. But the idea, I don't want to wait 40 years to do this. So we have a fundraiser to build this temple. In the meantime and in between time, our revolutionary spiritual consciousness called Black Goddess consciousness is a guiding force for us. And we're also guided by the principles of Ma'at. Udja Temple is a place of honor and praise and worship of the African sacred feminine. We have not forgotten our mothers. We have not forgotten Mother Africa. This is a house of reverence, and it's not actually a physical house. It's a spiritual house right now. But if you join on with us and work with us, sisters, it can be a physical place, and it is for you to run. And I would go forth and ordain priestesses and brothers who want to do the same work, who want to be a part of the work. You're going to be under the priestesshood. I know, just like in the church, there's like the priesthood, but the priestesshood will be the center moving piece for the temple to be physically built. And we've got to bring the resources together. But this is a place of honor and praise and worship of the African sacred feminine. It's a house of reverence of the African goddess, the Black Goddess, and we call it Black Goddess consciousness. I am the minister for this thing, or the priest for this thing. And we're a tiny space, we're a tiny thing, and we're getting bigger. And there are more people listening to these podcasts and all this that we're doing. And we're very happy of this growth. And we hope to be global. My family was out there in that bush arbor for 40 years. So I have faith that we won't be another 40 years. I don't want to be another 4 years building this temple because I'm tired. And so I'm asking as well. So we have two fundraisers. We have one to donate to the ministry, to grow the ministry, and we have one that is dedicated to my being able to go and get rest, because the work that I have done out here in the wilderness of North America, to use the Nation of Islam's construct, the wilderness of North America, I have done, as Udja Temple, advocacy for women who are victims of domestic violence, food sovereignty, um, gosh, housing. We've spoken in various places, and even our organization that we've kind of, the undergirding for the organization called Dynamite Hill Smithfield Community Land Trust. And she said, Baba, duh, we knew that something spiritual. We knew that Udja Temple, like, duh, like you can't hide that. I was like, I'm embarrassed because it's like, oh yeah, of course, like we praying and we doing all kinds, and we talk about the goddess